Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. We are the Group 6, and I am going to impart to you the crisis governance. So, by the way, I am Ms. Nihaya Bimoni, your reporter for today. So, crisis governance, we already know what crisis is, what crisis management is, and the level or the different levels of crisis. So, when a crisis develops, what sort of governance? What sort of system for running society is more resilient? So later on, we will be unlocking the word resilient. And does centralized control give the best prospect of survival, or is something more decentralized needed? So, possible political sources of crisis include military invention, internal coups, political paralysis, major corruption, and revolutionary change. One of the example of a great crisis is yung tinatawag natin na war. Okay? Wars in the past century triggered changes in governance in countries such as Germany, Japan, and Cambodia. This is actually according to Brian's book entitled The Effective Crisis Governance. So, by that, because of the war, no, itong mga nasabing countries ay nakapag-adapt ng changes in their governance, no, to achieve effective crisis governance. Okay, so war which can be considered a type of political crisis is devastating to human and the environment, and in fact can be a source of environmental crisis. So, what is crisis governance? Governments will be facing the challenge of responding effectively to an ever unfolding event with many unknown unknowns. So, a major risk is that political and administrative leaders dissociate, engage in policy paralysis, or fail to fully recognize the threat until it leads to irreversible damage, which is, unfortunately, exactly how some major countries seem to have responded. So, crisis governance, no? It is the whole set of activities and processes of organization that aimed to help the government and the population deal with threats or with the crisis. No. So by this, later on, we will know what type of governance, no, is the best in addressing crisis. So we have to unlock the word resilience. So resilience is the capacity of a system to respond effectively to assaults like this on its functioning or very existence. So the resilience of political systems include both the survival and the maintenance of formal decision-making processes and the associated systems such as transport, food, and communication for maintaining the survival and social functioning of the population. The resilience in the case of communication technology includes the capacity to keep functioning despite of the breakdowns or attack. No, despite of the crisis, resilience in the case of communication technology, for example, the internet. No, take note that the internet was originally designed to maintain communication in the face of the nuclear attack. No, way back then, no, one of the great crisis in the world, the nuclear attack. So the resilience of the political systems includes both the survival and the maintenance of formal decision-making process and of associated systems such as transport, food, and communication for maintaining the survival and the social functioning of the population. So there are actually two contrasting governance when considering responses to crisis. So ito yung dalawang type ng governance or contrasting governance when considering responses sa crisis. So first, we have here the stiff governance. So the stiff governance can be well suited for a particular task, often for a particular threat. So si stiff governance, it is a type of governance kung saan suited lang siya to a particular task only, no? So, yung classical example nito is yung dictatorship with a command economy approach. So, this approach is actually ideally designed for warfare. So, central direction can be used to mobilize resources for defense or attack, no? So such a system can have a great difficulty dealing with other sort of threats, however. So si stiff governance, example nito nga is yung dictatorship with a command economy approach, kung saan suitable lang yung approach na ito to the war na type of crisis. Hindi siya pwedeng gamitin yung approach na ito to other type of crisis. So yun yung siya ay tinatawag nating stiff governance. So a command economy, no, in addition, under the stiff governance, a command economy cannot innovate easily because the initiative of the population is suppressed, which means that retooling, no, for a different sort of threat, like economic competition, for instance, or a shortage of liquid fuels, is more difficult. So mahirap siyang i-unfreeze and i-refreeze ulit. So another governance that we could use in responding to crisis is the flexible governance. In the flexible governance, in contrast to the stiff governance, is actually based on the capacity to adapt, improvise, and change directions. It may not be ideally designed for any specific threat, unlike stiff governance na suitable lang siya to a particular task. Si flexible governance is hindi siya designed for any specific threat, but it is able to deal credibly with a variety of threats. No? In general, systems based on participation, high skills levels, robust debate, and mutual respect are more likely to be flexible. So, we have to mas pagbibigyan diin natin yung flexible governance compared to the stiff governance, no? Because according to the book of The Effective Crisis by Brian, flexible governance is actually an effective crisis governance. So, what is flexible governance? So, flexible governance, in addition to its meaning, it means that there are methods for making and implementing decisions affecting entire communities in a way that enable rapid adaptation to new situations. So, meaning mababa yung level of resistance in this type of governance when it comes to change. And this form of governance virtually requires flexible technological systems, which typically are modular, adaptable, and low cost. So again, sa flexible governance, kailangan ito ng flexible technological systems. Okay? So, para mas maintindihan natin, no, in the energy sector, we could have an example ng inflexible technology, yung hindi siya flexible, that is not suitable for flexible governance. And we also have the flexible technology that is matched to the flexible governance. So ano ba ang maaari natin ihalimbawa dito? In the energy sector, the best example of a rigid, inflexible, hindi siya flexible na technology is the nuclear power. It has a high capital cost, no, yung nuclear power, long lead times for construction, large unit sizes, and potential for causing environmental catastrophe through reactor accidents, terrorist attacks, or the proliferation of nuclear weapons. Because of its scale and potential risk, nuclear power requires special security measures, which in turn limit the possibility para sa mga citizen to participate. Okay, so how are we going to have a flexible technology system na maaari mag-participate ang ating mga citizen? So, we could have this, another example, no, in the energy sector is the small-scale renewable energy systems, no? Kasi this is much more better matched to flexible governance. Community-level solar and wind systems are relatively low cost, no? Halimbawa nito, and quick to construct and small in scale with only a small potential for environmental risk. For example, terrorists are unlikely to attack them. These features mean that communities are less locked in and to the technology, and just as important that corporate and government commitments to the system are less entrenched. So, in short, yung flexible technological system are well suited to flexible governance, no? Hindi naman natin kailangan mag-achieve ng masyadong complicated type of technological system na hindi naman makarelate ang majority. So, Let's now down to the four key features of the governance. Most likely to be effective in crisis, no? Itong mga features na ito yung maaari maging effective, no? As a key to the crisis. So, isa-isahin natin sila. So, the first key feature of the governance, no, that is effective in addressing our crisis or the crisis is the participation of significant numbers of people. Okay, number one key is the participation of significant number of people. So, significant participation is essential for rapidly responding to crisis. You know, people's commitment comes from being involved in decision making and feeling part of the solution. Genuine participation is greatest when power is shared. Kasi naman, if there is changes, no, or if the government would like to implement a particular policy or solution, then it is mas mataas yung level ng adaptation at mas mababa naman ang level ng resistance ng citizens or the people kapag may involvement sila. So there should be a significant participation. So the governance with extensive participation goes under various names, including participatory democracy, self-management, workers' control, and the neighborhood power. The next or the second key feature of governance, no, that we have here is the resources, including food, transport, and especially communication. So resources including material and technological resources needed to be available and ready. So a society needs to have the capacity to deal with future contingencies rather than putting all its resources into one development path. So we all know that resources is scarce, no? Limited lamang ito. So we cannot put all the resources into one development path only. So kailangan maging matalino tayo or the government should have a great decision when it comes to using the resources, no? There should be an economical perspective on that. So again, another isa dito sa diniinan dito sa number 2 na key feature of governance is yung communication. Communication plays a vital role when it comes to addressing crisis, no, for us to people to easily get information or data. Nang sa gayon, mas madali natin ma-accept or mas madali natin mariresolba ang nasabing threat or crisis. Then the third one is the openness, tolerance, and inclusion with involvement of many different sectors of the population. So openness, tolerance, and inclusion are actually necessary to be able to mobilize the entire society to meet the challenge. So when the significant groups are opposed to action, this can paralyze the efforts. Okay, so the governance form most suited to inclusion is yung ating consensus, or sometimes called as the unitary democracy. So in contrast to representative government, which can be called adversary democracy. But just as electoral system require innovation and modification to address problems such as voting fraud, consensus systems require experience, testing, and innovation to address problems such as entrenched resistance to a near unanimous agreement. So there is now considerable experience with consensus building processes. And the last key, no, the fourth key feature that we have is the learning skills for struggle and developing strategic acumen. So skills and strategic acumen are needed to be effective in responding to threats intelligently rather than in an instinctive and reflective way. So strategic insight is most likely to flourish in a form of governance that gives considerable autonomy to smaller units while enabling communication between them so that insights can be shared, tested, and applied. So to sum up, these four features are mutually supportive. Widespread participation is necessary for collective change or response, but it needs to be coordinated. Hence, the need for communication infrastructure and skills. Strategy can be more adaptable when there is openness to participation by a wide diversity of individuals with different perspectives and recognition that their perspectives and ideas may be worthwhile. Okay, so let's now down to the transforming governance. The transforming governance is turning each of the elements of the flexible governance into methods for transforming governance. So yung mga nabanggit natin kanina a while ago, no? Yung the four key features ng governance, no? The effective way ng pag-address crisis is it just ginawa lang siyang method, no? In this transforming governance. So rather than try to describe this flexible form of governance, which can quickly degenerate into arguments about preferred models, it is useful to look at methods, no, for moving towards these four elements, yung nabanggit natin kanina. So in other words, rather than fixating on the desirable end state, which might not be knowable anyway, so it is worth turning each of the elements of the flexible governance into methods for transforming governance. So, same lang sila pero may konting changes lang doon sa four elements kanina sa flexible governance, no? Na ginawa natin methods para sa ating transforming governance. So, we have here first significant participation. So this method for transforming governance, no, the significant participation, it is actually the initiatives to foster participation that can be taken at all levels within local groups, including formal association, from sport clubs to churches and informal groups. Leaders and members can foster greater participation. Local governments can introduce various forms of citizen participation. Companies can promote worker participation. So, one of the most promising initiatives is the movement for deliberative democracy, which includes experiment in direct decision making by citizens on important policy issues. So, an example of this inviting a randomly selected of 12 to 25 citizens, no? Yung tawag dito sa pag-i-invite ng random selected group of 12 to 25 citizens is actually called as the planning cells or the citizens juries. This is to address a policy issue over several days by reading materials, hearing from expert and partisans, and developing recommendations, all under the guidance of neutral facilitators. Then the second method, no, from the previous four elements of flexible governance is the resource for struggle. This resource for struggle, no, for the transforming governance promotes the development of resources for any struggle in an ongoing process in which many groups are involved. The movement for appropriate technology, typically small scale, low cost, locally produced, and locally managed technology for energy, agriculture, transport, and other sectors, is a model for building resources that support resilient governance. So take note also, under the resource for struggle, in the communication sector particularly, the key is the ability to maintain communication in a crisis. So the technology for network communication is becoming even more developed with the internet, no, the social media. So by this, it may provide or it can provide powerful tools for rapidly and flexibly responding to emergencies. And when people gain practice in coordinating responses, this has relevance for both political and environmental crises. So the third one is the openness, tolerance, and the inclusion. So responding to economic resource or political crisis will be much more difficult in societies divided into haves and have-nots. So this suggests that movement for greater economic equality can, as a side effect, help rebuild resilience. Okay, so the Occupy movement has put the issue of inequality on the popular and political agenda, but it remains to be seen in this can slow, no? But it remains to be seen if this can slow or reverse the continuing increase in inequality stimulated by corporate globalization. And the last one is the learning skill for struggle and developing strategic acumen. So this one, this last method, no, to the transforming governance, it is the numerous initiatives and movements around the world that foster greater skills for satisfying human needs, from agriculture to software development. So, a prime example is the open source movement, building software and other products that draw on contributions from numerous volunteers. Another example is the ever increasing information and tools for learning available on the internet. This enables learning outside of institutions. Okay, so we also have here the moving toward flexible governance. So these are the important details about the moving toward flexible governance. No, so first is in the face of threats and crisis, political, economic, and resource based, the most promising sort of governance is flexible. Okay, that able to draw on widespread participation and an abundance of human and material resources. Another thing is the inclusion of different groups provides a greater diversity of knowledge and experience for meeting challenges. Whether or not there is an ideal system, with all these characteristics, it is possible to move in the direction of flexible governance by taking initiatives that support participation, resource for struggle, inclusion, and skills development. Also, in responding to environmental and resource crisis, activists usually focus primarily on the immediate issues, trying to stop logging, for example, or the burning of fossil fuels and other damaging activities. And the last one is to maximize long-term effectiveness. It is valuable to complement these actions with effort to transform governance, as otherwise the same problem will recur or reoccur. So let's now down to the three lessons in crisis governance for the age of coronavirus. So we will be sharing to you, or I will be sharing to you the three lessons in crisis governance for the age of coronavirus. This is according to Taliawi et al. So as a transboundary crisis, no, yes, one of the transboundary crisis that we are all familiar with is the coronavirus or the COVID-19. So, COVID-19 represents a significant challenge to public leaders and their policy advisors who are expected to perform key functions like taking decisive action, handling overwhelming amounts of data, making critical decisions regarding resource allocations, and coordinating with stakeholders. So these managerial activities are challenging enough without a global crisis to contend with. In the current context, they are further complicated by ambiguous nature of rapidly metamorphosing events, which can make the links between cause and consequences unclear. So, timely response is of the essence. It marks the difference between containing a crisis and allowing it to spill over and completely overwhelm public organizations' ability to function effectively. So, no easy answer exists, and it will be a while before we can comprehensively evaluate and compare the crisis governance strategies of individual countries. However, the substantial body of research and best practice evidence on crisis management and governance may provide some useful lessons at this point in time. So, here we highlight three general mechanisms that public leaders attempting to steer through the crisis in the months ahead may take into account. And we illustrate their relevance with examples of the current use by the governments. Okay, so the first one, or first of all, is the effective communication. Effective communication is a key pillar of a crisis governance. So, as policies are put together on the go to deal with uncertainty and ambiguity, governments have to scramble to contain their crisis while communicating with the public in real time. So, communicating under condition of uncertainty is characterized by constant tensions and dilemmas. So take note that being transparent and accurate in relaying information, preparing the public for what is coming next, and expressing a degree of empathy in communicating policies can go a long way ensuring the effective crisis communications. So thus far, one of the example of a country, no, that a place that effectively use communication during the time of COVID-19 is the Singapore. So Singapore seems to have been fairly successful at containing the spread of the virus and the number of fatalities, while allowing citizens, school children, and business to largely continue life as usual. Singapore's use of social media and digital applications such as direct messaging and track and trace via WhatsApp, as well as its anticipatory yet measured public communication outings, including daily updates to the public, have helped to contain the virus spread and have been heralded by observers, including the WHO or the World Health Organization, as the gold standard response. Now, the second one is the adopting a whole of society approach is of particular importance. So in this crisis, okay, so citizens are asked to actively take part in containment measures, including social distancing. No, we are all familiar with this, self quarantining, and the community support for considerable yet unknown periods of time. A whole of society approach engages individuals, families, religions, institutions, civil society, the private sector, media, and others to support national efforts in order for them to be effective. So, kailangan lahat sila nito ay mag-isa-isa na mag-promote no, ng nasabing protocols for the national efforts to be effective. Okay, so in order for it to be effective and to prevent major law and order issues that exacerbate existing pressures on public sector's capacity, so all stakeholders need to be on board for these strategies to work. Moreover, to ensure society does not come to a complete stop during long periods of self quarantine or lockdown. Active engagement of employers, university, and schools is crucial in promoting remote work, homeschooling, and online education efforts. As an example, the Canadian Prime Minister's adaptation of the slogan Team Canada Effort, no, the Team Canada Effort, aims to harness social and community support in managing the crisis. And the last one, no, finally, we have the implementing evidence-based strategy based on historical as well as current data is paramount, okay, rather than acting based on what is politically expedient. So strategies rooted and validated evidence ensure the optimal use of resources and help to design probable scenarios. So partnering with research labs, no, you have to partner with the research labs and the institute on a global scale may help governments to adopt sound measures that reduce the threat of unintended consequences. So using reputable evidence as a key criterion when implementing exceptional measures may also garner public support. So for instance, a key study conducted by Imperial College London scholars helped change the course of the UK and the US government's policy on the COVID-19, possibly saving thousands of lives. No? Then those actually are the three lessons, no, that that we have learned from the coronavirus, no, worldwide, in terms of the governance, no, okay, the three lessons in crisis governance in the age of the coronavirus. So while COVID-19 represents a significant threat, every crisis also presents opportunities for sustained innovation and learning. So actually, mas nai-improvise, no? Mas nagiging advanced ang isang government or ang isang governance pagka nagkakaroon ng threats or crisis, no? There are actually also opportunities in this. So how successfully this crisis is managed will depend actually on how well each government is able to face it head on and bring society on board while coordinating effectively with stakeholders. Social systems are by nature adaptive, and this crisis presents a learning opportunity for all of us. This is a test for our governance systems, and it is safe to say our collective response will shape the future for years to come. Okay, so I think that's all for the crisis governance. Shukran and wassalam.